The atmosphere inside the San Diego County Courthouse was stifling, almost oppressive. The gallery was packed with spectators murmuring among themselves, all eyes fixed on the unfolding drama. The defendant's table seemed oversized next to the young man standing beside it, hands tucked in his pockets, chin held high, radiating quiet defiance. 19-year-old Ethan Carter faced serious allegations: grand theft auto and resisting arrest. But the charges seemed secondary compared to the way Judge Leonard Harris looked at him. From the judge's relaxed posture to the idle tapping of his fingers on the desk, it was clear this wasn't just about justice. Peering over his glasses, Harris gave Ethan a look that was half amusement, half contempt. "Think you're some kind of lawyer?" Harris said, voice dripping with condescension. "This isn't high school debate, son." Laughter rippled through the courtroom. The bailiff chuckled. The stenographer grinned. Even Prosecutor Gregory Vaughn cracked a smile. Ethan didn't flinch. He wasn't there to entertain. He hadn't dreamed of this moment, but he had prepared for it. Not this specific trial, but for the courtroom. While other kids obsessed over sports or video games, Ethan immersed himself in legal arguments and mock trials. His mother, Carla Carter, a seasoned paralegal, filled their home with war stories from court about sloppy prosecutors, biased judges, and indifferent defenders. He soaked it all in. By 14, Ethan could dissect a courtroom exchange better than most law students. But none of that impressed Judge Harris. To him, Ethan was just another teenager with a rap sheet. "Let's not drag this out," Harris muttered, cracking open the file. "I've got a tennis match at 2. The crowd laughed again, but this time, something shifted. Ethan's lips twitched into a barely there smirk. Harris had just slipped, and no one had caught it yet. Prosecutor Vaughn rose, oozing confidence. Everything about him, from his tailored suit to his rehearsed tone, suggested he already considered the case won. "Your Honor, the state will prove that the defendant, Ethan Carter, was apprehended in a stolen 2021 BMW X5, reported missing only hours before his arrest. Officers pursued the vehicle through downtown San Diego. The suspect fled, but was eventually caught. Fingerprints on the steering wheel match the defendant's. The evidence is clear." A hush fell as the words sank in. To the average observer, it sounded cut and dry. Stolen car, high-speed chase, fingerprints. Judge Harris glanced at Ethan again, then nodded at Vaughn. "Continue." Vaughn strode toward the jury, the sound of his footsteps echoing. "The defense might try to argue that this was all a mistake, that Mr. Carter is an innocent bystander caught up in the wrong place." He paused, turning to Ethan with pointed disdain. "But ask yourself, what kind of innocent man runs from the police?" The room tensed. Judge Harris leaned in, resting his chin on one hand. Ethan stood motionless. Vaughn flipped through a folder. "Here's the statement from Officer Michael Torres, who claims he saw the defendant behind the wheel. The vehicle was confirmed stolen, and the arrest followed proper protocol." Harris nodded again. "Seems pretty open and shut." And to most in the courtroom, it probably was. But Ethan had seen enough trials to recognize when something didn't add up. Still, he held his tongue, observing. Then Harris gavelled lightly. "Let's hear from the defense." He turned to Sarah Mitchell, the public defender who'd been nearly silent since the proceedings began. She rose, looking uncertain. "Your Honor, my client." Ethan gently placed a hand on her arm. She paused, then quietly sat back down. Ethan turned to the judge. "I'll be speaking for myself, Your Honor." A stunned silence fell over the room. Harris raised an eyebrow. "You're what?" "I'll be representing myself," Ethan repeated. His tone even and composed. A murmur swept through the crowd. The bailiff looked up, surprised. Vaughn's smirk returned just briefly before he chuckled. "Well, this should be good." But the mood shifted the moment Ethan stepped forward. No one was laughing anymore. He let the tension build as he stood still, hands in his pockets. Then he broke the silence. "Your Honor, before I begin, I'd like clarification from the prosecution." Vaughn tilted his head. "Go ahead." Ethan took a measured step. You stated Officer Torres saw me behind the wheel prior to my arrest, correct? Vaughn exhaled, sounding bored. That's what's in the report. Ethan nodded slowly, then turned to the judge. In that case, Your Honor, I move to strike Officer Torres' testimony from the record. Harris narrowed his eyes. On what basis? Ethan finally pulled his hands from his pockets and gestured toward the prosecution's table. Because Officer Torres couldn't have seen me in that vehicle. He wasn't even on duty when the pursuit started. A flicker of uncertainty passed across Vaughn's face. What are you implying? Ethan took another step forward. Your Honor, I'd like permission to request Officer Torres's GPS data from that night. If he claimed to have witnessed me inside the stolen vehicle, his location history should back that up. But, he paused for effect, I have reason to believe it won't. The murmuring in the gallery grew louder. Harris shifted in his seat, casting a glance toward Vaughn. Counselor, Vaughn cleared his throat, visibly tense. That report came from a trained officer, Your Honor. Are we seriously giving more weight to a defendant's claims than to law enforcement? Ethan responded with a small shrug. If the officer's statement is accurate, the data will confirm it. If it's not. He let the implication linger. Harris studied Ethan for a long beat, then looked to Vaughn. Does the prosecution object to verifying the GPS records? There was a hesitation. Not long, but just enough. Long enough for the jury to notice. Long enough for the audience to shift. And most importantly, long enough for the judge to raise an eyebrow. Ethan stayed silent. He'd seen enough trials to know what that pause meant. If Vaughn had nothing to hide, he wouldn't be hesitating. The judge exhaled slowly, rubbing his forehead. Counselor, Vaughn finally relented. No objections, Your Honor. But the tone of the room had changed. The confidence was cracking. Tension hummed in the silence that followed. Vaughn shuffled through his papers, the poise slipping from his shoulders. While we wait for that data, Your Honor, the fingerprints found on the steering will still tie the defendant to the stolen car. Ethan nodded once. That's true. He stepped forward. Let's examine that, shall we? Harris gestured for him to continue. Ethan turned toward the jury, eyes scanning each face. The prosecution wants you to believe that fingerprints equal guilt, that if my prints are in the car, I must have stolen it. But let's think this through together. He paused, letting his words settle before continuing in a measured, even tone. Imagine you're in a department store. You try on a jacket, hands in the pockets, maybe zip it up, then put it back and leave. Later, someone steals that jacket. Are you a thief just because your fingerprints are on it? Jurors exchanged quiet looks. Somewhere in the gallery, someone whispered. Ethan didn't give them time to regroup. That car, the BMW, was parked outside a Circle K on Harbor Drive earlier that day. I was there with 3 friends. We passed the car and I leaned against it. I even opened the door, it was already unlocked. Just a quick moment of curiosity. I didn't steal it, didn't drive it, didn't touch anything else. He paused, then asked with calm conviction. Since when does touching something make you a criminal? Vaughn rustled through his notes, searching for a foothold. Ethan wasn't finished. And while we're discussing evidence, Ethan said, turning to Harris, was the forensic technician who processed those fingerprints subpoenaed to testify? The judge looked taken aback. He turned to Vaughn. The prosecutor hesitated. No, Your Honor. He finally admitted. Ethan pressed his lips into a thin line. So let me get this straight. The state is using forensic evidence to try and convict me, but they didn't bring in the specialist who analyzed that evidence?
No testimoni.
No questions about the chain of custody. No chance for cross-examination. Vaughn didn't respond. Ethan nodded once. Noted. Judge Harris exhaled again, rubbing his temple. This was no longer the slam dunk he had expected. And Ethan was just getting started. He stepped forward again, his voice clear and unwavering. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce a signed statement from the vehicle's registered owner. The judge frowned. The owner? Yes, Ethan said. Mr. Thomas Bradley, the man who owns the BMW in question, gave a statement to police the night the car was taken. Strangely, it was never included in the prosecution's submissions. I think we all know why. He turned to Vaughn. Do you recall what Mr. Bradley told officers that night? Vaughn's lips tightened. He knew exactly where this was going. Ethan didn't wait. He pulled out a printed page and read aloud. I left my car running when I went inside the gas station on Pacific Avenue. Some kid must have jumped in and taken off. But it wasn't the guy you arrested. I saw the kid. He was white. Gasps broke out across the courtroom. Ethan held up the paper. That's from the original police report, the one the prosecution conveniently left out. The arresting officer acknowledged it. The state ignored it. And yet, they want this jury to convict me. Someone who doesn't even match the description of the actual suspect, beyond a reasonable doubt. Vaughn stepped forward, reaching for anything. Your Honor, this is irrelevant. The defendant was found in possession of the vehicle. Ethan didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. No, I wasn't. The words cut through the courtroom like a blade. I was arrested blocks away, walking home after grabbing snacks with my friends. I wasn't in the car. I wasn't near it. I wasn't running. The only thing tying me to this case is bad police work and worse assumptions. Judge Harris exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple again. The trial was falling apart, and everyone could see it. Ethan turned back to the jury. The real thief got away, but the officers found a black kid nearby and decided that was close enough. That's what this case is really about. Silence. Harris adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. Does the prosecution have anything further? Vaughn stood rigid, flushed with frustration. No, Your Honor. The judge leaned forward, eyes flicking from Vaughn to Ethan, then to the jury. Case dismissed. The words echoed in the chamber. For a heartbeat, the room was still. Then it erupted. Whispers, gasps, movement. Reporters scribbled furiously. Onlookers stirred in disbelief or quiet validation. Ethan stayed still. He let it breathe, let it land. Judge Harris gripped his gavel but didn't strike it. His gaze locked on Ethan, not cold anymore, not distant. There was something else now. Recognition, maybe even regret. Ethan returned the look, then turned toward the exit. He was almost at the door when the judge called out, Mr. Carter. Ethan paused but didn't turn. You should consider law school. A small smirk touched Ethan's face. I already have. Outside, the courthouse steps were chaos. Cameras flashed like lightning. Microphones lunged at him. Voices shouted over each other. Ethan, did you expect the case to be thrown out? What's next for you? How did it feel to dismantle the prosecution? He pulled his hoodie up, silent. This wasn't about spectacle. It never was. At the base of the stairs stood his mother, Carla. Arms folded, eyes unreadable. She didn't say anything at first, just stared. Then she shook her head with a sigh. Boy, you nearly gave me a heart attack. Ethan laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. Had to take the shot, Ma. She stared a beat longer, then pulled him in, tight. You always were the stubborn one. Behind them, the cameras kept flashing, but Ethan was done with them. Across the street, leaning against his car, Judge Harris watched. No longer smug, no longer detached, just reflective. He hadn't seen this case coming. To him, it was supposed to be routine, another defendant, another file, another conviction. But now he'd remember it. Because Ethan Carter had done what few ever do. He made the system look at itself, and for once, it blinked first. Here's the truth we can't ignore. How many other cases like this are out there? How many people have been convicted, not because of guilt, but because of bias, laziness, or a system designed for speed, not justice? Ethan knew how to fight back. But what about the ones who didn't? This wasn't just about his case. It was about all of them. And this courtroom? It wouldn't be his last. But next time, he wouldn't be the one in the defendant's seat. He'd be standing at the table, as counsel. Not alone, never again.